I've debated sharing this story for a long time. Being Cherokee, I was raised to understand that the land holds secrets, some beautiful, others terrifying. My ancestors lived in harmony with the land, respecting its power and its dangers. But some places don't welcome people, no matter how curious they might be. These places are not for us. One of those places is the canyon near my family's home. Growing up, my grandfather used to tell us stories about the canyon. It wasn't far from our house, just a couple of miles past the tree line, but we were always warned to stay away. He said the canyon was older than we could imagine, ancient, and it held things that weren't meant for us. It was sacred, but also dangerous. In Cherokee culture, we have stories about spirits that dwell in the forests and mountains. Some are benevolent, others are not. But the canyon was different. My grandfather said it was once home to the Yunwi-Tsunsdi, the little people, mysterious beings older than humankind. They could show kindness to those who respected them, but were vengeful if disturbed. Yet there were darker things in that canyon, two things far more dangerous. As a child, I didn't pay much attention to these warnings. To me, the canyon was just another part of the land, a forbidden place that piqued my curiosity. My cousins and I often dared each other to sneak close to it, trying to prove how brave we were. But even in our games, we never crossed into it, at least not until one summer when I was 16. That summer was just before school started again, and my cousin and I were restless. We'd heard the warnings all our lives, but nothing bad had ever happened. So we convinced ourselves that the stories were just that, stories. We wanted to see the canyon for ourselves, thinking it would be an adventure. Looking back, I know it was the dumbest decision I ever made, but back then, it felt like a thrill. We set out early one morning, carrying only what we thought we needed: some water, snacks, and our phones, even though there was no service that far out. By noon, we reached the edge of the canyon and stared down into the rocky abyss below. The canyon wasn't particularly large, but there was something unsettling about it. The air felt heavier, almost oppressive, and the wind whistled in strange, eerie tones as it passed through the rocks. We stood there for a moment, just looking. I felt a strange sense of unease, like we were being watched. But my cousin, always braver than me, laughed it off and started down the narrow path that led into the canyon. I hesitated. Every instinct screamed for me to turn back, but I followed him anyway. As we descended, the temperature dropped. Even though the sun was still high above us, it felt like we were stepping into another world. The deeper we went, the quieter it became. No birds, no insects, not even the wind, just an unnatural silence. When we reached the canyon floor, things started to feel off. At first, it was subtle shadows flickering at the edges of my vision and the sensation of something brushing against my skin, though nothing was there. My cousin didn't seem to notice, or if he did, he didn't say anything. We continued walking, the sound of our footsteps echoing eerily off the canyon walls. Eventually, we reached a small clearing. The ground there was covered in strange carvings, spirals, symbols, and distorted figures that looked almost human but were twisted in unsettling ways. I bent down to examine the carvings more closely, and that's when I heard the whispering. At first, it was faint, almost like the wind, but it grew louder and more insistent. I couldn't understand the words, but the voices were unmistakably human, just beyond the edge of hearing. I looked at my cousin to see if he heard it too. He stood frozen, staring at something in the distance. I followed his gaze, and that's when I saw it. At the far end of the clearing, partially hidden in the shadows, was a figure. It was tall, far too tall to be human. Its body was shrouded in darkness, and though I couldn't see its face, I felt its gaze, cold and unblinking, locked onto me. The whispering grew frantic, like the voices were trying to warn us, trying to tell us to leave. My heart pounded in my chest. I wanted to run, but my legs felt paralyzed. Then the figure stepped forward, and the stench hit me, a rancid, overwhelming smell of rotting flesh, like something long dead but still moving. Without a word, my cousin snapped out of his trance and bolted. He didn't look back, and I didn't need to be told twice. I scrambled after him, my feet slipping on the loose rocks. The whispering followed us, growing louder, no longer just voices, but screams and cries of pain and terror. I could feel something chasing us, something unseen but very real. The air felt heavy, like the canyon itself was pressing down on us, trying to drag us back. We reached the top of the canyon, breathless and terrified, but the moment we crossed the threshold, the whispering stopped. The air lightened, and the world seemed brighter. But we didn't stop running until we were miles away. We never spoke about what happened that day. My cousin refused to talk about it, and over time we drifted apart. He moved away a few years later, and I haven't seen him since. I tried asking others in the community about the canyon, but no one would talk. It was as if they knew what was out there, but they didn't dare say. I've never gone back, and I don't plan to. Whatever is down there, it doesn't belong in this world. It's ancient, angry, and waiting. So if you ever find yourself in a place that feels wrong, where the air feels too heavy, or the land seems to watch you turn around, leave. There are places on this earth that don't belong to us, places burdened by centuries of darkness, and they do not want to be disturbed. The canyon is one of those places. I don't know why I'm telling this story now. Maybe I just need to get it off my chest, or maybe someone else needs to know. For years I kept it to myself, but after everything I've experienced as a guide and park ranger in the southwestern desert, I'm certain some things are beyond explanation. The desert, like the canyon, is beautiful, but it demands respect. It's a land full of stories passed down through generations about spirits that roam the night, creatures that walk among us, and forces that don't welcome strangers. I used to think those stories were just that, stories, but not anymore. Not after what happened 6 years ago.